Welcome to the Tapestry of Life. I am Dr. Pascal Scoles, Professor of Behavioral Health and Human Services at Community College of Philadelphia. Today's topic is family survivors of domestic violence. Knowing that someone you care about has been abused or killed as a result of domestic violence can leave family members overwhelmed with feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, and despair. Today's show will focus on resilience to this traumatic life event and how it empowers all of us with hope and strength. I want to welcome back my co-host, Renee Norris Jones, domestic violence survivor and advocate, and my very special guest, William Spratley, who lost his daughter to domestic violence, and Lauren Swartz, who lost her older sister to domestic violence. You know, this is a kind of an interesting show because I know everyone today from other experiences that we've had. Renee has done a few shows with me, and we did a couple of shows on domestic violence already. And all three of you had participated in the public service announcements, which were just wonderful. And it precipitated a kind of discussion about, like, well, what happened in a more detail than the PSA or the public service announcement, and the aftermath of that. So I don't know where we want to start, and I don't know who wants to start first, but your story is very interesting to all of us, and I'm sure it will enlighten a tremendous amount of people in the audience.
Well, you know, I mean, I can start by saying I also lost my sister to domestic violence in '99. It was a murder-suicide, so in that case, there was no one to blame. There was someone to blame, but you had no one to direct that anger, those feelings to. So I know that both of your stories are different and where the person was caught. And so just from that being slightly different when you have no one to blame anyone, I remember my sisters, other siblings, and I discussing how that felt. Like you wanted that person to not be a coward, for lack of a better word, sure, to be able to face them in court, you know, to be able to deal with this and having that, all of these emotions and know where to put it at. Mm-hmm. So maybe we can start from the rear end of that and saying, how did you feel when that person was brought to justice?
Sure. When my sister's husband was convicted of first-degree murder for killing my sister, I felt like that was the thing that I needed to be able to even consider how to move on with my life. If he was still out there living his life, doing his thing, it was very difficult for me and my family to do anything else besides wonder and worry. Over time, I stopped being scared of him. I wasn't fearful that he was coming to get me. In the beginning I was, because I was so overwhelmed by the thought that this could even happen, that my sister could have been murdered, that it could have been him, that we could have known him for 7 years. And that although we tried at times to do things to get her out of the situation, there was really nothing we could have done, I think, to stop it. And dealing with from the day she died throughout, it took about 5 years for justice to be served in her case. Even though we knew it was him who killed her, we didn't know a lot of the details of the case. And the police and the district attorneys always said, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. And so he was out there doing his thing, living his life, because we couldn't prove it. Wow. And that was a very difficult, dark time where it was impossible to plan or to really be engaged in things. As you know, I was 25 when my sister died, and that, you know, those 5 years where you're thinking about your career and getting married and starting a family and making lifelong friends and connections were a really dark period. Wow. For me. And the moment that the verdict came out as guilty for first-degree murder, and then it was about 6 months until the sentencing happened. But until those things took place, I just felt stuck in this dark place that most people couldn't see in. And they couldn't even see that I was there, but I knew that's where I was living.
Right. So in between that 6 months when he was convicted before the sentencing, did the conviction add any sense of relief at that point?
Absolutely. I had faith that the courts would
Prevail. Yeah.
would prevail, and that they would sentence him to life in prison. And that once they secured the first-degree murder charge, then I figured he would be away for life in prison. And being the youngest person in my family, I don't have a very large family, I was always worried that at some point my parents would pass away, and my aunts and uncles and my grandparents, and that I would be the only person in this earth with him, with Eric, the man who killed my sister. And I needed him to be in jail to figure out how to handle that. I worried 20 years from now, when my parents may be gone or longer, that he and I would be the only people who would be like holding on to this.
Wow.
He'd be waiting to be arrested, and I would be waiting for a lot of things, just waiting. And now that he's in jail, I have the opportunity to create some peace.
And did that peace create like a sense of closure? If a sense of closure, if that's even possible.
Yeah, it did. It gave us confidence that our instincts were right. It was he set up her murder to look like a hit and run accident. So there was a lot of extraneous information and a lot of rabbit holes that we and the police had to go down to really figure out what happened. And for a long time, we didn't know if multiple people were involved. He also set it up so that he could collect about $1.5 million in the insurance. So it was a multifaceted, it was a crime of passion, but it was also very premeditated. And he was a smart man and had a criminal history. And so he was pretty good at this. He was very close to getting away with it. And for a long time, we felt like maybe we were crazy or confused, or that we would never really solve the crime. And I remember the day when they said we arrested him, finally, after 5 years of waiting, and saying, he did it, go get him. And they said, never make a move too soon. Our detective always told us. And so we waited and we waited through some really dark times. But once he was arrested, then we said, okay, we're not making this up. And then once he was brought to trial and all the facts of the case came out, and we said, and then we learned a lot too, because there were so many things that the detectives could never tell us, because we would be witnesses.
Right.
And in fact, during the trial, I didn't get to go to the trial because I was held in the witness room, because I was a witness, so I couldn't hear the testimony of the other witnesses. Yeah. And I've still never read the 2,000-page transcript. I don't know if I'll ever do that, but I have it. But then when he was convicted and then sentenced, each of those steps allowed me to think, okay, there can be some peace and some closure, and now I can think about doing something with the rest of my life.
During that time, were you in any kind of a support group, or were you getting some kind of counseling, or how did you deal with this kind of helplessness or hopelessness or despair, because it took 5 years to bring the person,
I feel like I wore out my welcome with a lot of my friends and some of my family who didn't want to talk about murder all the time for 5 years, and I appreciate the time and the compassion that they gave me, but there comes a point where people just don't want to talk about it with you. But it was all that I could feel.
Sure.
And I talked about it with my family, and then for a long time it was all my family and my parents and I could talk about. We stopped talking about anything else. It was always about the case and about Justine and about the police and what did you hear from Detective Jones today, for years. But then we'd start to learn things from the detectives or from the district attorneys, and we couldn't tell anyone. So I felt like I was trapped behind this sort of veil, and I couldn't process it with my normal support system, because I couldn't tell them any of the information. It was confidential, and they were tired, and I didn't want to lean on them anymore. So at times I did go to some counselors, and I told them, I said, I just need a place to put this. I need to just talk to you and tell you all of this information, because I can't hold it all together in my head anymore.
Sure. Do you mind, just because the audience, I don't think knows your story about what happened, could you give us a little idea of what happened to your older sister?
Sure.
That wound up in the situation that we're talking about now.
So in 1999, my sister Justine moved to a new college in Virginia. Okay. That's where we lived at the time. And she started working at a big home improvement store. And one of the supervisors there was a guy named Eric. And she liked him and he liked her, and they started dating. And even from the beginning, there were some signs that she told everyone, this is not the guy I'm going to marry. This is not who I want to be with. I know he's kind of, rode a motorcycle, kind of rough and tumble, former Marine. And he had 2 kids from a previous relationship who were very young, like 1 and 6. But she continued to date him, and very early in their relationship, there were some major red flags.
Like?
Where she called me one time, it was within 6 months of them first meeting, and asked me to come to her apartment to fix a hole in the wall. And I said, well, what's the deal? How'd you get a hole in your wall? And she said, well, Eric and I had a fight, and he threw a phone, and it made a hole in the wall, which didn't sound right to me.
Right.
So I said, sure, I'll come. And I just wanted to scope out the situation. And when I got there were fingerprint bruises on her arms.
From him grabbing her.
And that was about 2 weeks later. I lived in a different city than her. So I had a lot of questions. And I started asking her what was going on. And I became very upset. And then she ended up, as my big sister, comforting me and saying, oh, everything's fine. It was just a fight. This relationship's not going anywhere. It's just kind of a short-term thing. So I fixed the hole in her wall. And then things sort of died down for a while. And then they dated for 7 years. And throughout those 7 years, there were other instances, not very many, but where I would have insight into knowing that he was violent with her, and that he was an aggressive person, and that he was very controlling. And over time, her willingness to share that information with me shrank.
Diminished.
Right.
Yeah.
And I always felt like
to protect the
right.
situation.
And I was walking this tightrope between wanting to find out everything I could, but not break her trust and not push her too far. I knew if I started to ask too many questions, she would slam the door in my face. Just like she had been isolated away from my parents and from her friends and from her other network, she still talked to me. I was one of the only people who ever went to her house where she lived with him. My parents never saw it. Her friends never saw it. And I wanted to keep that, what I hoped would be a lifeline into her life for as long as possible. So sometimes she would make me aware of things that were going on, and then I would try and get involved and ask a lot of questions, and she would shut me out. So then we had sort of a cooling off period, and then we'd come back together, and there'd be more alarming news or information.
Did it escalate, like from throwing stuff at the wall to her having then bruises all over her, or was it emotional? It was all those things, I'm sure.
I think it was all those things. The pieces that I'm sure escalated were financial abuse.
Okay.
She had very good credit and very good financial management skills, but by the time she died, he'd accrued about $100,000 in debt in her name and ruined her credit.
Wow.
And we rebuilt her financial picture as a means to help get information for the case, and she was on the precipice of going over a financial cliff.
Because when we, to go back to the public service things and the other groups, one of the thing that we get fed back a lot is that we didn't realize that domestic violence was more than just physical abuse. Right. And it's a theme that we consistently hear back when we show some of the shows. So it again, goes to your point.
Right, and the isolation is very typical, and there's a lot of shame that goes with domestic violence. It's similar to rape. You feel tremendous shame to be able to share it with you, but I imagine to be able to have that information and feel helpless with it. Had to be challenging. Can you share a little bit of that? Just how it felt. You said she kept talking to you and then kind of withdrawing, and you guys were going back and forth. How did that impact you, and did you share that with your parents or other family members?
I didn't share it with my parents, and right after she died, we went to the police station for an interview, and they wanted to interview us so they could clear us as potential suspects, just part of the process. And when we got there, they split us up, and the detective interviewing me said, well, are you aware of any violence between them? And so I unloaded all these stories, and they asked my parents the same questions, and they said no. So then we all came back together, and the detectives started relaying what I said, and my parents were just shocked. So I had to have a pretty difficult conversation with them, saying I knew a lot of this was going on, but I knew that if I told you, you wouldn't you're her parents, so you wouldn't do nothing. And I knew if I told you and you did something, then that would break her trust with me. And I wouldn't, she wouldn't probably change her course. We couldn't make her leave.
Right.
She's an adult. And so we had to just be there to support her and to hope that she would leave and come to us.
Yeah, it's very complicated, the things that keep a woman engaged in that relationship. You know, it's fear, it's tons of things. So I totally relate to that as a survivor, that it's not just, okay, here's a roadmap app. This is someone that you're in the trenches with, if you will. So it's not that hard. And I'm listening to your story and relating it to my own, to be able to confide in someone, and the backing off. And if they did tell someone, I'm going to close off, because the batterer's part of his job is in isolating her. So the fact that she told you that meant that she had a lot of trust to be able to share that with you.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
You know, you often wonder, you know, there's a common theme that runs through, like, domestic violence and people who are in the addiction field and in mental health. And it's almost like there's this, we keep denying that we even have the problem to discuss. And the way we deny it is not tell a lot of people about it, which is exactly what they should be doing, in the sense of getting some relief from it. And then when that doesn't work, we kind of like blame other people. We project it onto others that, you know, that something happened. Or we rationalize the situation we're in, and it's the best thing we could get, kind of. And when that doesn't work, we act out. I mean, someone acts out. And then they have a honeymoon, you know, and then they return to what is considered to be normal life. But there's nothing normal about any of that story.
I
in a
think,
sense, when you think about it, don't you?
Yeah.
I think the blame stops with the victim. I mean, the batterer is blaming her, accusing her, you're not this. He's tearing down that self-esteem, all the blame. Today in 2014, I'm still asked, why did she stay? So that continues to blame, and she's taking all of that blame in. Must be me, it must have been something I did. And after a while, I mean, for all of us, change is the hardest thing for us to do.
For anyone.
I don't care who you are, what you're going through. But I remember at some point thinking, if I stay here, at least I know at 5 o'clock every day, or 5 o'clock, 2 o'clock every Thursday, he's going to come and he's going to beat the crap out of me. I can depend on that. I don't know what I'm going to do. If I leave, then he's already told me that I'm not going to make it, and this is not going to happen, and that's not going to happen. So you take all of that blame, and it's almost as though the blame stops there. So and he's telling you, your parents, your family's going to respond this way, and your siblings and your friends, and they don't have any respect for you. So you are getting this 24/7.
Right.
So it stops right there.
And there is this kind of sense of trying to isolate the story.
For sure.
So that's one of the ways in which they control the life.
Yes.
They isolate you in a variety of different ways, by your credit cards or your phone, or, you know, and I'm sure we've had this conversation that's what was happening in your situation with your sister.
I always think that if somebody wakes up every day and is determined to ruin another person, they make it their full-time job, as I think my sister's husband did. I'm going to ruin her financially. I'm going to isolate her. I'm going to hurt her. I'm going to scare her and threaten her. He'll probably be successful.
Sure.
Because most people don't think that that's possible. I'm not like preparing, as an individual, I'm not preparing for that to happen to me. And so she just stumbled into this relationship with this person who had this objective to destroy her. And he put all of his energy into it, and he was successful. And I don't think that she saw it coming.
Right, so while he's coming from a point of manipulation, she's still coming from an emotional point. Where this is someone, even though it's a temporary relationship, but your
Someone
emotions
who cares
are there,
about you.
right, someone that cares, and you're almost blindsided head on without even seeing it.
Yeah.
So the time you go under, you have no clue, and you're still dealing with the emotional repercussions of, how can this person do this to me? You're almost in shock. When you're in shock, you're kind of coming from that point of view.
William, this I'm sure rings for you. I was wondering what was happening. I know it was your daughter, I think,
yes.
and I know I'll hear it, I'm sure, but I remember talking to you and you're taking care of the children, and so
Yes.
it's somewhat similar but quite different.
Similar, but a little bit different.
Yeah.
In Lauren's case, different in mine is that when I first found out that my daughter was missing, I distinctly knew it was this one person, which was her boyfriend. When I called 911 to put the missing report in, I said to them, he did it. I know that he did this to her.
Wow.
As I'm going to her apartment from my house, in my mind, it was set. This who's killed my daughter. I knew it had to be something tragic for her not to answer her phones, to leave her kids unattended, to leave her 3-week-old baby unattended. That wasn't like her. In Lauren's case, you had to wait 5 years to find out what happened. In my case, the day that we actually found my daughter's body, which was in 2010, he had really strangled her and stabbed her and left her body in her bedroom closet. That particular night, we was able to apprehend him immediately because the family had kept him at a location. So when we called 911, we said that we have the killer here in our presence. And keep in mind at that point, very emotional. I mean, you just discovered your loved one deceased, and you had this person looking in front of you, and you asking this person, just tell me where she is. And this person is saying to you, we had a fight. Well, where did she go to? I don't know, she had a fight. But knowing that he had just killed her, was a lot to deal with. Was a lot to deal with.
And she was still in the same place that you were having this conversation with him when he was saying, right?
She was in the closet. Yes, she was in the closet. And the funny thing about this was that when we put the report in, the police came out for a missing persons report, and they actually did the interview with the murderer. They talked to him. They found out that there was a fight that occurred. He had the scars on his neck, everything. They never checked the apartment.
And you
They
said normally
never
they
went
would
in.
do that, wouldn't
But they have a checklist now.
Oh,
but at that
okay.
time when it happened, the checklist, they didn't check. And had they checked the apartment, they might have found her body even sooner before the family discovered it.
Yeah. As a father, did you have signs that you saw in the past when your daughter, did she talk with you? And did you have a sense that there was this kind of violence going on in the home?
As a father, you kind of pick up the sense that something's not right, but she protected him. What I found out later was that Mia was like the mothering type.
Yeah.
His family had disowned him. She felt that she was all that he had. And I kept saying, okay, you have 2 other children, and you can't change a man. A man's going to be a man. She kept saying, Dad, I love him. And I'm going to be honest with you. When your child tells you they love someone, your heart goes out.
Sure.
So I kind of backed off a little bit. She's an adult, like you said, and you kind of let them work things out. When she was pregnant with my grandson, which is his son, that was one of the most delightful times. I mean, it was like Christmas time in her eyes. I mean, she said, Dad, I'm having his baby. I'm having his son, and it was like, for me, I was kind of had some reservations about it because I knew the relationship wasn't where it should be. Some signs. He had a hard time keeping in employment. He wasn't working. He had been arrested sometimes for certain issues, but she loved him. So as a father, I wanted to support her.
Sure.
And of course, with my newborn grandson coming in, I want to be there and to give her that love that she had. So you tell me you love this man, I'm going to say to you, okay, if this is what you want, I'm going to support it. However, I don't feel comfortable with it, but I love you. My love is for you and my grandson that you're getting ready to bear. Lo and behold, after she had his grandson, she had his son, he killed her a month later.
Oh, really? A month later?
A month later, he had brutally just killed her. So that particular night was a night of so much emotion. It went from like where she at to how could he do this to her? Why? It was so many questions. Why?
Sure.
When we went to court, it took us about 2 years to get some kind of satisfaction or justice. The first year was the hardest year because you're meeting with the attorneys. You're looking at photos that you don't want to see.
Sure.
You're hearing disturbing details of a case that you didn't want to hear about.
Or didn't even know about.
Didn't even know
Yeah.
about, and they present this evidence to you. That was the hardest year. And then we was told that we would have a trial by jury, which he selected. Okay, he has all the rights. This is what he wants. He gets this, which we understood that. Then we found out that the day we used to go to court, he decided he didn't want a trial by jury. He wanted a judge to hear the case, which pushed the case back another year. Now this time we're like just drained.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, we just buried our daughter. You're going to give us what you want us to tell us what you want to do. I want this trial by this. I want it this way. And we have to abide by that. And then we have to wait, and we're constantly calling the DA's office. Okay, what's going on? Have you got the DNA back? Have you got the evidence back? Well, we're still finding out different things. It was just one of the most blackest moments that I think as a father I've had to live with the loss of my daughter and waiting. Finally, the second...
Not knowing if justice is even going to be
Exactly.
served. I mean,
Right. It could have went any way.
Yeah.
We was asking for first-degree murder, which was what we wanted, first-degree murder. So we really didn't know if it would actually get to that point. Finally, we went to court, and I just want you to know that to walk into that court, knowing that in a couple of seconds, this man that killed your child is going to walk through that door, and you have to face this person and keep. It took a lot. It took a lot for me to sit there with my family and see them escort this man in when I had so much anger because I wasn't ready to forgive yet. 2 years to sit in this court and see this man walk in. And he had the audacity to walk in. He turned around, he looked. He looked at my family and me, his mother, in her eye and looked at us and turned back around. We went through the whole trial. He had nothing to say. All the testimony came from my side of the family. And we finally got the verdict, which was life in prison without parole. We also asked to have his son's name changed because my daughter, out of love, she had named him after the father. To us, that's just too much weight, too much. And we asked the judge, could we get sole legal custody at this time of the hearing? Thank God the judge was a very, very tough, lean judge, and he granted it to us. He gave us everything that we asked for. He got 3 counts, which was life in prison without parole, abuse of a corpse, and intent with a deadly weapon. We got all of those. One thing I remember the most is they say to you, do you want to say anything to the family? Honestly, in my heart, I really thought he would have enough courage, not but for me, but for the courage of his son, to at least say, on behalf of my son, I'm sorry. At least for your son.
no.
He's not even a person. This
Thing.
sat in the courtroom, and me, his mother, came up, and it broke my heart. It broke my heart because she gave her closing statement. She said, this is what you've done. You destroyed my life. You took away my daughter. You know, everything. I came up and I told him how I really felt. You took away something that was given to me by God, not you. You had no right to take away her life. That was not your call.
That's right.
Your son and her 2 sons are going to be raised without a mother. Your son has to grow up knowing that as he gets older, his father killed his mother, and now you're gone out of his life for the rest of your life because of what you did. This young man's going to have to grow up without both parents, biological parents, because you made a conscious decision to do what you did, and you destroyed your life. You took our daughter's life, but the entire family has been in an uproar. After her death, her oldest son, which is now 15, William had behavior issues in school. He was acting out in school.
Sure.
He was fighting. I would get calls. William's not focused. He's doing disruptive stuff. That wasn't William. I would talk to him, and he was like, Papa, he had no idea what he was doing. One day I got a call from the school that William had just bolted out of the classroom. Just bolted. I went to a school. We had no idea where William was at. tried to find him. Luckily, he was with a friend, and they called us. And I said, well, what is it? What is it? He just couldn't talk about it.
Sure.
The other son, Anthony, was very recluse. He was quiet, reserved, very just non-communicative at all. So finally, I had to get counseling for us. I reached out. And after a period of the grieving period, which I'm still grieving, I called a couple of agencies. I wanted shelters, someone to confide in. And one day I was directed to Women Against Abuse. Women Against Abuse just listened. They said, just come into our office and let's just talk. And I told them my entire story. Then I was able to get counseling for my sons. I call them my sons. They are my sons.
No, that's right.
My sons.
Thank God you're there.
Right.
And we got them in counseling. And if anyone's listening out there that's going through this or has been through this, counseling was a breakthrough. It opened
Definitely.
up doors. One of the exercises that the counselor did at that time was she had us in the same room together, and then we had separate rooms together. But in the closing of our session, she had William and Anthony do a book. Since they didn't want to talk about it verbally, she said, draw pictures, write stories, anything you want about how you felt that day and about your mother and where do you see yourself going. I have them books, and it hurts to see their expressions because Will drew a picture of his mom. And she had tears coming down. And he said, I love you, Mom. Then Anthony had another picture where he had like him playing basketball and his mom was cheering. And those are moments that these two young men remembered. And all Mia wanted was just them to be happy. She said, Dad, keep my family together. And that resonates even now.
Sure.
And I'm keeping these three boys together because now I'm raising them. I'm raising them to know who their mother was, what she stood for, and the love that she has given them. Ethan is going to be even harder for me because knowing that I had to one day tell him that your father killed your mother.
He doesn't know yet.
He doesn't know yet.
And how old is this? Is the oldest?
This is the baby now. Ethan is now 4. A brilliant young man. He smiles, he calls mama, he's in school, and I have a piece of Mia.
Sure.
I'm one of the parents, I'm blessed because I have 3 pieces of my child still left.
Not only are you blessed, but they're blessed to have you. To believe,
Thank you.
believe me, I tell you.
Thank you. But my only concern was that why does the family have to go through the pain like you did, Lauren, and the anguishment? As a victim of domestic violence, I felt that, do you hear what we're saying? Why do we have to wait this long? Why is it that we have to go through all of this just to get this man put away? Families should not have to go through that struggle. Or even a domestic situation, there should be better conditions. Better conditions. I will never see my daughter. Her sons will never kiss their mom. They would never, their mother would never get to see them graduate from high school, go to any of their events. But in retrospect is the fact that, like Lauren, like Renee, and myself, we're the survivors of all this. We're the beacons. We're going to stand up and let our light shine for our loved ones and for ourselves as we speak and bring this to the forefront. We're not done yet. This is our platform. This is my platform for life, domestic violence, as it is Lauren's. Whatever it takes me to do, I'm going to do it because when I look at William and Anthony and Ethan, I know that their mother was killed. She was taken away from me. We're not done yet. We're going to keep on to get things changed, like Renee's updated me on. Lauren's stepping in, and we're going to be a powerful team to reckon for. And for us men, and I want to talk to the men out there. This is just not about a woman. She's not your property. She is someone's mother, daughter, friend, and a loved one. That's not your property. And how dare you put your hands on her? And how dare you think you have the right to step to her disrespectfully and call her out her name? She has a name that she was given. She has family that love her. We as men need to step up. Step up. And stop hiding behind this facade that we do and say, I have a problem. I have a problem. And get help for it. Just like we can go to counseling, you can get help. But to murder someone because you feel it's the right thing to do or because you have that much anger, that's not right. That is not right, sir.
You know, as you talk, I didn't realize it at the time. I have 2 sons and a daughter, and I remember my daughter in high school was dating someone who was abusive to her. I mean, where he would take a baseball bat and break her the windshield in her car, and she would hide it from me. And then one day I realized what was happening, and I actually went over to their house to talk to the parents about it, and made it clear to my daughter that I don't want her being with this guy. But they were only like 16 or 17. And when I went through this whole story with her, I didn't, you know, it was interesting. I didn't view it as domestic violence. I viewed it as anger management, which maybe is a lot of what goes on. And she ultimately did leave. And a couple years later, because your story reminded me a little bit of, you know, a father and a daughter, so to speak. And I remember a few years later, she came up to me and said to me, thank God that you were there to say something, because I thought that's what love was. You're 16 or 15. What, you know, really, what do you know?
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So, and subsequent to that, he's been in and out of arrest and prison, and he's battered people, and I don't think he's ever killed anyone. But I know their parents, and I occasionally see them. I say, well, how's, you know, X? And they say, oh, he's in prison. He's doing, you know, a couple of years for this or for that. And it could have easily been my daughter who stayed with him because she, at that time, thought that that's what love was. So there's that. Your story resonates. I mean, even, you know, I mean, the story just has such meaning that it reflected on a history that I never even gave it much thought, except I was just trying to protect my daughter from some young kid who I just thought was, you know, just being rambunctious or something. At the time. I didn't really know, and I'm in the field, and I didn't give it a whole lot of thought.
Well, you know, what's most domestic violence starts with teens. I believe it's between 14 and 17.
Yeah,
and when it hits them there, and nothing happens, the intervention that you did, they go on to be domestic violence victims. My own story started when I was 16, 17 years old.
Okay.
There's now educational initiatives where they're going into the middle schools and they're educating youth about domestic violence, because that's where it starts at. So it's
a middle school issue.
The middle school. It starts at that age, you know, 11, 12, 13, 14.
Drug use start around there too.
Yeah. Yes.
Interestingly enough.
Yeah.
So this is an epidemic that's for society, that hits our families, it hits our neighbors, it hits our communities, and Lauren and William's story demonstrates the impact, the direct hit of that, and how it hits their entire families. You know what I'm saying? And their friends, as Lauren said, you know, friends and who you can share it with, and that burden, and it can hit anywhere. I mean, in Philadelphia, we just had the incident of the young lady who was kidnapped.
Yes.
You know, and my first thought, well, most of my thoughts usually go, oh my God, please don't let it be domestic violence.
Sure.
You know, earlier this week, there was another murder-suicide that happened in Chester, where the woman was killed. So it's everywhere, and we've got to get a handle on it, because it does impact real families, real lives, and it's not just, okay, this is what happens, that's all you hear in the news, but the families have years and years and years, and even after someone is caught and they're sent to jail, there's still remnants that you kind of get on with your life a little bit, but I'm sure it still impacts your life. I've done a lot of these things with William, and I see him still get emotionally choked up, and Lauren, I'm sure your family goes through the same thing with and how long has it been for Justine since
It was 8 years this week
8 years ago.
that he was sentenced?
that she was killed.
She was killed.
In
But it took
2006.
5 years to get him into the prison. So the pain of that dark experience, if you want to look at it that way, that it's only 3 years, because resolution, if you want to call it resolution, that he's away at least, or whatever, just happened really a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And the same.
Yeah, I was just
in
going to
your
say for
case,
William,
too,
yours
right?
is about 3 years
Yeah,
since the
about
case.
3-4 years.
How did you
yes.
get through? I mean, I kind of get a sense from both of you that there were a lot of support people around you and things happening, and you know, and I mean, I often say this: God bless the Women Against Abuse. I mean, it's an organization.
Yes.
There's quite a few of them out there, but that's one that I have a familiarity with because of my relationship with basically the three of you and the executive director who was on a commission with me. But what is startling to me is that they only have 200 beds. I mean, they just opened up another 100-bed unit, and I'm convinced that if you opened up 500 beds in a month, it would be filled up.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and you were talking about New York having thousands of, you
Right.
know, of beds in the sense of some work you were doing yesterday, I think.
Right,
in New
right.
York.
And we turn away like 14,000 women. And I know what that's like. I know what it's like to find the opportunity and the courage to leave, to make that phone call. Frequently when I speak, I say, you know, Philadelphia has 1.5 million people.
Yeah.
And I asked the audience, I said, with that many people, how many beds do you think we have? Just call out. And there were 22, 44, 70, and there's
Yeah.
one. Well, we
One.
just got 2 a few months ago, but even 200, we're still
Way under.
way under. And you have to look at that individual person that's calling in and not getting that bed, not getting it, and have to go back, have to go back. But the conversation is still, why did she stay?
Yes.
You know, and hopefully the stories that we're hearing today gives folks a glimpse into what it's like to live in that.
People offered my sister places to go. Her friend did, and our family, and she and I talked about it. I'm like, you could call this person in our family, and they would give you as much money as you need, or you could go here or there if you ever wanted to leave. And she always said, I wouldn't want to bring this to anybody else's home. I wouldn't move in with my friend who I work with because he would show up there. And when she and I lived together, he showed up and tried to attack her, and I was there, and that scared him, and it startled him, and he ran away. You know, it's not like my sister didn't have family or she didn't have any money, but she could have accessed resources outside of going to a shelter. But so why didn't she? Well, because she was so scared of him hurting her and hurting anyone else
Anyone
that
close
she
to
wouldn't.
her, like you. Or
Yes,
someone else.
she wouldn't bring her life that she felt was so broken to anyone else. And that's part of why shelters are so important, because they provide a safe place that has a higher level of security and protection, and it's a hidden location, and it has a lot of support. The shelter here has so much support for the women and families who are living there. And if she come and showed up and to live with me, and I was at work and he showed up at the door, what would she do?
Right.
You know, it's kind of like almost like a hidden topic. I mean, it's still, even with all the things that we do and the advertisements and the public service announcement, it doesn't seem to get the play that it does. I don't understand that. I mean, sometimes I say, well, maybe there's just an awful lot of people abusing out there, and when they hear it, they just deny it or react to it. I don't know. But you would think that this should be, kind of almost number one on the public health space to be worked on, because it has such an impact on so many people. I mean, just hearing your stories are almost like post-traumatic stress. If you look at the symptoms of that, the PTSD, you could see it right there. Now, I can assume, and you can tell me this, is that even though it's 8 years, 5 years, or something like that, that you'll be walking through an event somewhere, and something will trigger a past story that will then make you very, very weird to yourself.
Yes.
And you say to yourself, when am I going to get over this? And it's very much like that. I know that the stories about recovery are like that too. Right. You see someone or a song comes up and it throws you right back to where you were. And I wonder, what do you do now to kind of stay so the whole three of you are very resilient people. I mean, it's like, God bless your resilience. I mean, if it wasn't, if you would have gone down with them in the sense attempted suicide or, got depressed and, couldn't manage your life and lost your job, something like that, you would have really given in to the person who did the damage, so to speak. In reality, you have this kind of wonderful resilience that we talk about in positive psychology, that you're doing something about it to make sure that it doesn't happen to other
and you know what?
fathers, daughters,
It's healing in
sisters.
that. It's definitely healing. It's been 35 years for me, and I'm still in therapy.
Yeah.
But it's healing. Initially, my work with Women Against Abuse was giving back. But as William said, it becomes your life work.
Yeah.
It becomes your life's work where you know that you're making a difference, and it almost gives you a place to put that feeling.
The experience.
The experience. And Women Against Abuse always says self-care, self-care, self-care. Know your limits. Even in sitting here talking today, I know that I need to exercise self-care. Where am I doing? What am I doing later? Am I going to take some time? And I'm sure these two can speak to the same thing, the self-care.
Yes. And I think for me, what happened with the Mia, after going through the funeral and everything, I was totally numb.
Yeah.
I was totally numb. I was totally numb. But what kept me kind of focused was those three kids.
Yes.
I had to put myself on that back burner and say, I have 3 young children that has to stay focused in school. And one thing I wanted for those 3 boys was to have a normal life.
Yeah.
To have to go to school and feel normal and to be okay. Even though I knew they had just lost their mom, my focus was to keep those young men as positive and as just lighthearted as possible.
Sure.
So even though I was grieving, I had to hear my gut. I couldn't project that. I had to get up in the morning, fix breakfast, get them boys ready for school, take care of paperwork, get them in school, shots, all that stuff. So there was really no time for me to think about my grieving part. But then on the flip side of that, when I became a Women Against Abuse, and Katie was one of the counselors, she said, let it out. We had a session in the room, just Katie and I told her my story, and we cried together. That was the first, initial layer was me just crying and crying. And you hear so much about men shouldn't cry or tell your sons don't cry. Well, let me tell you something.
Real men cry.
Right, a
Real
real
men
man
cry.
will cry. From a father and a young man that was told by my father, I don't want to see you cry. That's something that a wimpy or another kid would do. No. When a child is in pain or as a man's in pain, a real man will cry.
Sure.
So we need to really open that door and be careful our language when we're saying a real man doesn't cry. A man cries. He might let you see that he's going to cry. Oh, but he's going to go in the back room, his car. That man's going to cry. But like I said, I was totally numb. Like you said, Rena. I didn't think about Will. I thought about Anthony, William, and Ethan.
Sure.
Are they going to eat? Are they going to have the school proper? Are they going to get in school in time enough? Once I got that focus and got them in counseling, then I could kind of focus on myself. And another good thing about Women Against Abuse was I became an advocate. Once again, as an advocate, I was able to go out into the community, tell me a story, do workshops, and just be vocal. That was the second layer of my healing. I just kept peeling layers off, and layers off. Now I'm here today. I still hurt. I still cry. I still grieve. But I say that, you know what, this is bigger than Will. There's a young lady or either a young man out there that's being abused and he can't speak up or she can't speak up or get help. So it's about not just me. Even though I've lost someone, it's a bigger picture than myself. And we have to understand that, like you said earlier, don't be ashamed. I'm not ashamed to sit here and say, because in the beginning, I would have never thought I would be talking about domestic violence. Never. I saw it on TV, I saw it in the books, whatever. But until you walk in that light and you see your child dead from a domestic violence, then you think about it.
Yeah, it's home.
You know, you said something, and a lot of people, it's out there, you hear it on the news or whatever. It happens to 1 in 3 women at some point in their lifetime. So it's not like we're not hearing it.
Right.
It's not out there. It happens. As a society, we're not hearing
it.
You know, and that's we're kind of, that's that domestic violence kind of, I don't want to hear
Yeah,
that.
it's not in my area. It's
Right,
over there
right,
somewhere.
right. Or
Yeah, I
it's
think
in my
that's the
area,
issue,
but
yeah.
if you think about a neighborhood or even a city block, how many women on that block are dealing with that?
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And I want to say that it warmed my heart so much to know that we opened up 2 shelters. We opened a second shelter this year, and the first shelter, Now they have names, and the first one is called Amia's Place, in honor of his daughter.
That was
Really?
that was an honor.
Oh,
that
really?
was
I didn't know
honor.
that.
Yes,
Really?
it was an honor.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
That was a really honor. And that was just, it just made it a pleasant moment from all that tragedy, how tragedy can turn into something positive and good for someone else to live. And in one final note, I just want to say real quick that I had just went to a men's abuse seminar last Thursday at Drexel. Wonderful event, wonderful, wonderful. The highlight was just to see men speak and talk.
Yeah.
Just a flip of a light bulb. No sooner than I left the event, this is a very, very true story, walked off the bus to walk to my apartment, guess what I saw? A woman screaming in the street. This woman was being abused. Right on my street corner. And guess what? Not one of my neighbors or any neighbors came out to help this young lady.
Yeah.
I called 911 and they saying, well, is anyone helping you? But finally, she wouldn't go into my apartment with me. I said, ma'am, come over. I want to get you away from the scene because I need to do something. She didn't. She wanted to stand there. Of course, she wanted to be verbal with them. But what appalled me was that this is a woman at 9 at night screaming for help. Everyone is looking out their windows, looking through their peepholes. But is there anyone coming out to get in? We need to get involved.
Yeah.
We need to get involved.
Even if you're calling 911.
I called 911.
Call 911.
Yes.
You know?
Well, there is a tendency to like act as though nothing.
Exactly.
You just walk away from it because you don't want to
Right.
get involved. And the unique thing about the whole three of you, and also the whole Women Against Abuse, is that you're very involved, and we need really more of that. So, I sit here and I do. I've done quite a few shows now on Tapestry of Life, and the ones that there's certain ones that have impact on me. Like this topic here is particularly relevant because it seems to like permeate culture, it goes all through
Yes.
a lot of places. And yet somehow the public information or the resources don't seem to permeate as much as the issue is out there. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because there's just not a lot of recognition of the problem, or there's. What do you think?
I think it's one of those family problems, one of those things that as a society, there's certain things that happen in the house that we keep in the house. It's family business.
Yes.
I remember, what was it, in the 80s or 90s, probably the 90s, when Oprah came out and said, I was a victim of child
That's right,
sexual
I do
assault.
remember that.
Rosie O'Donnell and folks started speaking up, and it brought it out of the closet.
Yeah.
The silver lining of this whole thing with the NFL and Ray Rice.
Yes.
The silver lining is that there's a national discussion.
Yes.
It's important for us to keep that dialogue going. But it's a national discussion. And I've been at lots of events, and sometimes the comments that I get, I'm going, oh my God, they're so far to the left. But you know what? They're talking about it.
Yes.
Good, bad, right or wrong. It's a discussion. It's a debate.
Sure.
And we need to do everything to keep that conversation going, so it doesn't die down. So that's the beauty of this is, I mean, I remember from what was it, August through mid-October, I remember saying, in 35 years, I've never heard the word domestic violence. When you turn on the TV, everything was domestic violence, and I'm going, I've not heard this on TV in 35 years total. The amount of time, so now there's less, so we have to make sure that we keep that
Keep that alive, so to speak.
alive.
Yeah, keep it
alive.
alive.
But during that period, there was a lot of that going on.
We only have a few minutes left. And I'm wondering, like, what's life like now for you after that event? I'll ask the whole three of you, actually. Like a minute or so about, like, what, after the event, what is different now that you're doing that you weren't doing then? I mean, you've kind of already talked about a little of it, but like, how do you see your life going from that event now into the future?
My day-to-day life is normal. I go to work, I've got kids, I stay in touch with my
You have,
family
what,
and my
2, 3
friends.
kids, I think?
Yeah, I've got 2 kids, 2 little boys, and on the surface it looks normal, but it's always something that I have with me. There's a book about September 11th, the child who lost their parent, and he describes it as having heavy boots. And that always resonated with me. And in my victim impact statement in the courthouse, I said, I feel like I always have heavy boots. It's always there. And it makes me take my steps a little bit more carefully and cautiously. I'm kinder to people. I'm more patient.
Oh, okay.
I'm more compassionate. I think, what kind of day could that person be having? It just, you can't ignore how terrible life can get once you've been through something like this. And I also want to spend more of my time, I'm trying to spend more of my time being an advocate for these issues and telling my sister's story. There's nothing we can do to bring her back, but I want her story to live on, to inspire other people to say, that's happening to me or my friend or my sister, and I want to do something differently that might change the course of someone else's life.
So it's a part of your life fabric right now. It's like
Absolutely.
something you do till you die.
Absolutely. She's my sister.
Yeah,
I always,
I totally understand it. I really do.
And the same with myself, just like what Lauren said. It's something that you live with every day. You live with it, and you know that at some point you have to stand up for what you believe in. And for me, like Lauren said, we raise our kids. We get up in the morning, we go to work, and we put our armor on. We put our armor on, and we go out there in the world and say, what could I do to maybe help someone or to save someone's life? And then you move forward from that. And for myself, I'm more focused now. I feel I have a goal, and my goal is to one day, before I leave this earth, hopefully I can see domestic violence, which is an epidemic, be cured. And that's my lifetime goal.
I'm listening to Lauren talk about, she's kinder now. She's a gentler person and a more caring person. And I immediately thought about myself as a survivor. I live by this never again, and it's truly a never again.
Sure.
So I'm working towards getting towards that. And it's a work in progress. I'm not sure if I'm ever going to get there because I live by this. What do you mean you brought me coffee? I wanted tea. Because I live by this never again. So I'm ever vigilant, in protecting it. So I just saw that contrast in your statement, but I'm working to get there because it will make me a more rounded person, less wounded.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a stark contrast in always looking, always aware, sometimes too much.
I also
But that's where the therapy comes in.
And I get rid of people I don't have a good feeling about.
Yes.
My
Yes.
sister and I are both like, well, maybe he's nice. Maybe he's having a bad day. Let me save, let me help.
no
And now
bad
I
days.
think that guy is a creep. And if I see my friends dating someone or I'm interviewing somebody for a job in my office, and
Sure.
I trust my gut. And I wish I had done that more with my sister's
I
husband.
often say in class that I think it was Fritz Perls was a founder of Gestalt psychology. Often they wrote a book I think called Toxic People or something like that, or In and Out of the Garbage Can, I think was the name of the book. And he often says that as therapists we have to deal with toxicity because we see it all the time. That's what our business is. But in real life, we can just walk away from them. We don't have to talk to them at all,
Yes.
and try to keep as many positive people in your life as you can.
Yeah.
Yes.
And surely meeting the three, well, Renee I see a lot, and I see that you're just wonderful people. I mean, really, it's a joy to have a show with people like you. I mean, it's really nice, and
Thank you.
I love hearing your story because I think it'll have a lot of impact on a lot of people.
Let's hope so.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank my guests for appearing on the show today, and I want to thank you for tuning in. You have been watching Tapestry of Life on CCP TV, the educational channel of Community College of Philadelphia. I am Dr. Pascal Scoles, Professor of Behavioral Health and Human Services. See you next time. Thank you.